Protests erupted in Phoenix overnight over fears a local woman is about to be deported to Mexico. She went to the immigration center for a routine annual check-in and was arrested. Activists say it may be the result of President Trump's recent executive order on immigration. Officials say the woman was detained because she was arrested 10 years ago during an immigration raid.
Times are changing in America, especially for undocumented immigrants. Living as an undocumented immigrant has always been a struggle, but over the last 8 years, Obama deported more undocumented immigrants than any other president in history. However, the number of people deported per year has dipped over the past couple of years.
During his campaign, Donald Trump promised to increase deportations. Since he took office in January 2017, the number of deportations has spiked and continues to grow.
In response to the ever-increasing number of deportations, many cities have declared themselves sanctuary cities, meaning that their law enforcement agencies will not arrest people based on a lack of documentation, nor check for documentation when making arrests. Places of worship across the country have also become safe havens for undocumented immigrants. These institutions will, in extreme cases, harbor undocumented immigrants at risk of deportation, shielding them from Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE. This is because of a declaration ICE has made saying that they will not enter sensitive locations such as schools, hospitals, or places of worship. Congregation Mishkan Israel in Hamden, Connecticut, led by Rabbi Herbert Brockman, recently became a sanctuary synagogue. To find out more about his decision, we sat down with Rabbi Brockman to hear his thoughts on the current situation.
So, what motivated your decision to make Congregation Mishkan Israel a sanctuary synagogue?
Well, I mean, a number of reasons. One is obviously the need for people who find themselves threatened by deportation, that they would be able to find a place that of safety and sanctuary. You asked me this question. It's almost the anniversary of the St. Louis, when the United States turned away. It was June 6th, 1939, when 960 German Jews came to the United States and they were turned away. These refugees were turned away and weren't permitted to land and had to go back to Europe, many of which ended up being killed, in the Holocaust. So as Jews, obviously, it's a very important issue for us. And when we see that there are people that are being threatened by deportation and forced to go back to situations where their very lives must be at stake, it seems to me that people need to stand up and say that that does not reflect our ethical beliefs as Americans, or certainly as Jews.
Okay, so what will Congregation Mishkan Israel do going forward to help protect innocent undocumented immigrants from being deported?
Is really a complicated thing. Most people, when they say a sanctuary congregation, they immediately go to the end, and that is physically being a place where people can come and live either temporarily or even for a longer period of time. And that's certainly part of it. That may be necessary in some cases. In most cases, it means, and I'll just give you an example of this week. So this week, 3 women had to report for hearings, deportation hearings in New Jersey. Now, these are poor families. They don't have cars. They don't have transportation. And so we got word of that. And so members from Mishkan Israel, it's called accompaniment. That is, you're trained to go and accompany these people on their hearings. And the purpose, so you go with them and you present yourself with them. You don't represent, you're not an attorney or, that's another step. But just what we find is just being present, just being a witness to the hearing itself can help the judge or the person making the decision be more lenient, because you're not doing it in secret. You're not doing it in the shadows. That's where evil happens. But if in the light of day, when there are people standing there watching the proceedings, people tend to be much less You know, it's like if police carry cameras on them that they show what they're doing, they tend to be much less, they try to de-escalate instead of escalate the situation. And we know that that's true. There's actually statistics that demonstrate that when you go with accompaniment, that the tendency is, so here are three women, members of our congregation, drove them down to New Jersey. They had to be there at 8 o'clock in the morning. In this case, it was especially frightening because these three women were told to bring their children. Now, they had no idea why. That's a very unusual request. So they drove down. They did have a lawyer with them as well. And all three women were given stays. And were able to leave the hearing room and come back here to New Haven.
Thanks, Rabbi. It was a pleasure talking to you.
It was a pleasure talking to you too.
The creation of sanctuary cities has caused a constitutional dilemma. One of the provisions of the Constitution is the Supremacy Clause, which states that federal law supersedes state or local law. Therefore, on a strictly constitutional basis, cities should not have the right to ignore federal immigration law. In response, some states have signed laws that ban the creation of sanctuary cities. For instance, Texas Governor Greg Abbott signed a bill into law on May 7, 2017, banning sanctuary cities within the state of Texas. However, this has not come without consequence. Austin, San Antonio, and the Workers' Defense Project, along with many others, have filed a lawsuit against their state with the hopes of overturning the law. Despite the backlash, many still stand by Abbott's decision. We talked to local Republican Rhodey Conway to hear why he opposes sanctuary cities.
Do you believe that sanctuary cities should have the right to exist?
Well, I suppose the real question that you're asking me is, do I think that cities should have the right to violate federal law at will? And the answer to that question is no.
Okay, so what penalties, if any, do you think should be brought upon so-called sanctuary cities?
Well, the one that immediately comes to mind is something that's definitely within the purview of the federal government, is the withdrawal of federal funds and federal aid programs, or at least the dialing back on them, because there must be some sort of consequence for violating federal law.
Okay. Do you think that the influx of undocumented immigrants in the United States has negatively affected the lives of American citizens?
Yes, I do.
Can you explain that?
Well, when you have the sudden influx, and when I say sudden, 20 years in the grand scheme of things is actually not a very long time, and that's the period of time where illegal immigration, especially from Latin America, has really spiked in this country. When you have a sudden influx of low-wage and low-skilled labor, it really does, it negatively affects the labor market, especially for people who are already here. Because why would you pay an American employee or an American citizen who has rights that they can enforce for themselves when you can hire someone at a third the cost without any of the legal repercussions for overworking them? So in that sense, it's led to lower wages and higher unemployment, especially in low-skilled jobs.
With growing tensions over the creation of sanctuary cities, this issue has been thrust into the forefront of political discussion in the minds of many Americans. Immigration policy directly affects the lives of many people in New Haven and other communities throughout the nation. This issue will not be resolved without open discussion and a willingness to compromise from both sides.